Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk about a big issue with people who have narcissistic issues or immature personalities. And I think this is a problem that actually can actually complicate the personality issue. It can actually complicate the narcissism or complicate the immaturity. So it becomes a compound problem, almost like a vicious cycle. And this is the problem of being unlikable. Okay. And I think being unlikable touches us very deeply. Okay, so I think it is a little mysterious. I think being unlikable is, in part, I think it has to do with our deepest instincts. Okay, so we'll never get to the bottom of it, and it's going to seem very baffling and mysterious to us. Okay, and I think that because I think other people, how would you say? I think other people have a sense when they don't like someone else, you know? And I think the person who is not liked by others, in other words, the person who is not likable, kind of knows deep down inside that they're not likable. It's a weird instinct. It's so deep. And I think that just at that very deep level where you sort of know you're not likable, you just immediately start compensating, okay? Either by trying to make yourself more likable, which just complicates the problem because you're not really dealing with a deep problem, right? Or possibly where you start to develop a very deep sense of hostility towards others because you know that they don't like you, okay? And I'll bet you, as much as this applies to anybody who has narcissistic issues or immature issues, this probably applies also to the politics in the Middle East, you know, with the Palestinians and the Jewish people, because I think both sides have a lot of unlikability, right? And I think that in some dynamics, instead of trying to compensate by being more likable, you actually compensate by being more hateful and more antagonistic. So I think for those of us that want to deeply analyze why, let's say, antisocial people, let's say just kind of vicious, very unpleasant people, what sparks that kind of animosity towards others? What sparks that kind of loathsome sort of meanness, just being mean to other people? You know, in part, it may just be a complex reaction to that chemistry of being unlikable, and it may be sort of the left turn you make in compensation. Instead of trying to be more likable, you try to be, it's kind of a weird perverse left turn where you just become more kind of vicious and sort of hateful, basically mean, you know, whatever. But I think deep down inside we're down in that mystery of unlikability. Okay, and I think unlikability is a cluster of factors. Okay, and it's something very unpleasant for us to talk about because it involves us talking about things that injure our that are offensive to our dignity. We all want to have dignity, you know. Let's get over this talk of like, oh, I want to have high self-esteem or I want to be, no, it's just dignity. Just and so sometimes to encounter the possibility of being ugly in yourself, like say have ugliness in one's own self, okay, it punches us in the stomach. But I encourage people to go ahead and just take it on that every human being can have some ugly characteristics, okay? And I think paradoxically, when a human being actually takes on with good humor and maybe with a sense of humor and maybe just, don't fight it, having ugliness, like I have a lot of ugliness. My God, just where do you start with my ugliness? I have vitiligo. I've got bags under my eyes. I'm missing a tooth. I mean, whatever. I mean, we all have ugliness, right? But the bottom line is sometimes you just take it on with a little humor, and it turns out that you actually can. Well, it's not magic, but if the more we can take on our own ugliness and sort of just take it on and just kind of accept it, in a sense, we at least vaccinate ourselves a little bit, okay, from some of the complicated, how would you say, sort of the compensatory reactive psychology where we sort of react to being, let's say, unlikable, right? Because sometimes it's more in how we react to it that actually complicates the problem more than just the basic problem, right? I will guarantee that however ugly, however unpleasant, however unlikable a person is, if that person just accepts and is able to fully accept that basic unlikability, okay, they will save themselves all the problems of all the compensatory complications of, let's say, compensating for that unlikability. And I guarantee you it'll be 1,000 times more manageable, and you'll end up being probably a little bit more likable. you know Although we have to set expectations. I think this is an important thing. We need to set expectations. A person doesn't have to be tremendously likable, okay, to have a successful, happy life, okay. And this is the thing. We see examples of people who are very likable, and it's sort of like, oh my god, if I'm not like them, then I'm not likable at all. There's a whole spectrum of likability. And we don't have to be extremely good looking. You don't have to be extremely likable. You can just be moderately. You can even just be neutral, not unlikable, not likable, just in the neutral world. you know and so sometimes, if we can see, if we can just tell in our instinct that we're just not likable, we're not very attractive, we're not very beautiful, um, maybe the goal should not be, oh, I want to become very likable. Maybe the goal can just be, how can I work on just being moderately, neutrally, not too unlikable, just kind of, or if I am a little bit unlikable, if I am a little bit ugly, how can I make the best of it? You see what I mean? As opposed to trying to sort of nudge yourself into a level that is not you. And so you're sort of faking reality, and you start to develop a basic, deep faking in your internal being. I think a lot of women suffer this because of the temptation to get into a lot of makeup, a lot of camouflage of the body, using different clothing, or even like plastic surgery. And in this sense, I guess I kind of understand the body positive people, the people who are just sort of open with their imperfections. Although I think they try to twist it to make it seem like that's likable. Okay. And I think really the more honest thing is maybe to accept that maybe it's not that likable, but just to be open anyway, and not to flaunt it, not like in your face, but just neutrally accepting, whatever is our cluster of attributes that is not really, let's say, likable. So I think likable is a combination of things in us that are maybe not very beautiful, okay? Because I think there are some basic natural standards of beauty, things that are kind of repulsive, and things that are kind of defective, okay? And I think this is going to be an issue for anybody with cluster B, because I think one of the core attributes of cluster B people is a limited processing ability in the brain, where we have limitations in our ability to process and hold competing, dissonant considerations. Okay. So, for example, like, say, a typical reaction, I think, of a person with cluster B is you get so flooded by your immediate response to a single consideration, a single circumstance, that you sort of don't have any room for the broader context and perspective of other circumstances and just the context. So that we'll end up, like, say, overreacting to things, or we'll end up getting too sort of engrossed in certain considerations at the expense of others. And I think we'll just come across to other people as having poor judgment and just kind of a gross immaturity, or maybe just a crude overreactiveness to certain things. And I think it's sort of telling to other people at that gut level that there's something defective in your mental capacity. You know what I mean? We don't think of it consciously. Just deep down inside, you think, oh, there's something wrong with that guy. And that happened to me as a child. I watched my parents both. My parents had terrible tempers. They would get very upset, and they would sort of lose perspective over just the bigger picture. So they maybe to sort of temper their reaction, and they'd have overreactions to things, and I would be embarrassed. More than scared of my parents' temper. I was embarrassed at how little ability they had to sort of hold and tolerate, let's say, unpleasant things. And it made me ashamed. And so deep down inside, I didn't know anything about neurology, okay, but I knew there was something wrong with them, that it was like a weakness. It was something defective in their mind or their constitution. And I could sense that instinctively when I was just 3 or 4 years old. There was something embarrassing, okay? And so I think that this is a problem for us with cluster B. Is I think that, of course, we're so into the camouflage, we're so into compensation that we sort of forget, but that deep down inside, we feel like there's something defective in our constitution, our neurological, just our personality constitution. And so um, what I'm going to suggest is that deep down inside, people sort of already know before you even before people even get to know you, they already know. I think people give off vibrations, they give off vibes. I think you could just sort of tell when a person seems like, oh, that guy's like a dangerous guy. That guy could be like really reactive. If it's bad enough, it's kind of disgusting, to see somebody who really is kind of psychopathic, knowing that that person could just explode. And it doesn't make them glorious. They may think they're glorious, but it really makes them pathetic and kind of disgusting. Like a lot of times when you see people like on a street level of psychopathy, kind of like the thug level, it's really more disgusting than it is, like say intimidating. You know what I mean? Even though it would be intimidating, to be in a bad moment with a person like that, but really is kind of like disgusting, And so I think that we have to come to terms as cluster B that we may have certain things in our constitution, just the limitations, our neurological limitations that may come across as being very glorious. Oh, I could have such a bad temper, I'll be intimidating people. But really it's pathetic, because it is sort of a neurological deficiency. It's a defect, or it's a gross immaturity. It's so gross, so extreme that even if we worked on it, we'll probably still have that problem, So maybe if we can find a way to sort of get away from that quick instinct to try to compensate by being more likable. And I think that is kind of the core of like kind of the psychopathic, that sort of paradox where somebody can be so mean and vicious, but they put across a fake, a false, they present falsely as being really nice and charming, but it's because they're concealing or sort of compensating for what they know deep down inside, even below words, even below their ability to understand in terms of words. Just instinctively, they just know there's something kind of disgusting about them. Okay. Now, the way I've heard a lot of people say is that, oh, I have poor self-esteem. I think that I'm ugly. And so I think I'm ugly, so I compensate. No, it's because deep down inside, you're ugly. Okay. I take it further. I think deep down inside, we know there's something defective and disgusting, And so there is that need. I don't think it's that subjective, actually. I'm trying to be more courageous. I think we need to be more courageous. It's not enough to say, oh, well, I'm under the belief that I'm ugly. I have this, I don't know, somebody infected me with this belief. No, it's because maybe there is something ugly, and there is something wrong and defective about having a very immature, a very low capacity for, let's say, tolerating things and maybe being overreactive, that kind of psychology, that kind of constitutional neurology that is kind of disgusting, but instead of having a meltdown over that, just accept it. And I think from there, from the point of acceptance, I think we can move forward. It's just we have to maintain realistic expectations. That the end goal is not to be like really likable, and the end goal is not to be like have this masterful, impossible neurological capacity that we'll never have. But the goal should be to address our deficiencies, okay, and accept them. Take the gut punch and learn to live with it, but learn to do something with it. You start where you're at. Okay, I have a very limited ability. I have a lot of, let's say, I have a bad temper. I get flooded, when I see an attractive person, or when I'm tempted to do something like steal something. I'm so flooded with that I lose all my perspective. Well, that's a big behavior problem. Okay. And it should be disgusting, but what do I do with it? And then you start in your place. You don't try to pretend to be at a higher place, and you start in your place, and you avoid associating with people who are at a much higher level of maturity, because you're not going to mix well, and you need to find your place in the world, but work hard to improve from the place that you're at. You know what I mean? So I think that will take away all the pathology and all the toxicity of trying to present falsely in that compensation, like how a lot of women do with all their makeup, where they literally are camouflaging themselves and misrepresenting themselves to be more beautiful than they really are, right? or like with the plastic surgery. You know, I know we're all free to do that, but I think that for people with cluster B, it's probably not a good step for us, because I think the things that we're concealing are especially disgusting, and they're disgusting in ways that could have a lot of impact. For example, it's one thing to have, like, say, an ugly face, right? An ugly face, but it's even worse to have an ugly character. Okay, because if you're concealing an ugly character and you're misrepresenting and you're inducing people to think that you actually have a better character than what you have, they might hire you for a job that you really shouldn't have. Okay, responsibly speaking, if I have a lot of problems with basic emotional judgment and basic emotional, capacity for, weighing different considerations and maintaining, let's say, objectivity, maybe I should avoid even misrepresenting myself to have a lot of responsibility in certain areas. I need to be careful about that. Like I think in my life, I've learned that I can assume some responsibility in certain areas, but I have to be careful where I do that, right? And like, say, I used to be an attorney, but I decided to let my license go. And so what I do instead is I work with attorneys, okay, and I work as support for them, doing research and writing and stuff, so that I'm not taking full responsibility for the case. I'm sort of under supervision, you might say. And I find that works good for me. In other words, I haven't abandoned all responsibility. I do take some responsibility, but I found my niche where I'm not going to take the complete responsibility. I take sort of an intermediate level of responsibility that I think matches my limitations. You see what I mean? So I'm not going all the way down to zero, but I'm finding the realistic place that matches, the person that I am. You know what I mean? Or let's say I used to be a pilot. It was so hard for me to let go of flying airplanes, but when I look back, I'll be honest, I had a lot of problems with judgment. I made a lot of mistakes. I was actually a pretty good pilot. This is a sad thing. I could actually handle, and I had kind of the gift of flying very smoothly. And a lot of pilots don't have that. They have a lot of oscillation in the way they fly, and it's like that basic. It's almost like a gift. It's like the people who can tune an instrument really easily, or the people who can shoot pool very accurately. Some people can fly planes, but the problem I had was with judgment. And I would make very bad judgments. And I would sometimes show my impulsivity in the way that I made decisions as I flew. And I had a couple of, not really dangerous, but things that really made other pilots really surprised, And deep down inside, I realized that it was not ethical or moral for me to impose my personality deficiencies in the world of aviation. And in fact, the FAA disqualifies people from flying if they have a personality disorder. So I think deep down inside, I kind of knew that I didn't belong in that career, and it was very hard to accept. Okay, but the good thing is that you don't have to destroy your life. It's not like you have to end your life. You just have to go to a place where you do fit in, and then make the best of it. Make the best of it. And so, I guess, as far as I'm concerned, the problem of being unlikable, okay, I think even though we all know in psychology, we all know that the problem with a lot of cluster B is compensation, okay, I think we still have denial in psychology, where we want to think that the low self-esteem that we're compensating from, the low self-esteem is actually subjective, and that we really are more likable deep down inside than what we really are. Okay. And what we're compensating for is a perceived unlikability, or like a subjective unlikability that maybe the result of being contaminated by bad parents or whatever. And, to some extent that may be true, but I think we're still in that narcissistic avoidance because it hurts, I guess, or maybe it probably doesn't even hurt as bad as we think, but we don't want to touch the uglier part, the sadder, more challenging part, which is that we may have aspects of ourselves that actually are objectively unlikable. Okay. And we need to be honest that when you have a very limited, grossly immature personality, okay, where you really do have a lot of limitations in your ability to hold different stimulating considerations and still have perspective, right? Like, say, the classic example, a person who gets so flooded by how attractive they are to women, they start acting like an asshole around women, or they just start acting kind of weird because it's so obvious. They're so over flooded by how attractive they are to women. Well, that turns people off because it's disgusting. It is disgusting. It is a limitation, and it's real, and I have sympathy for it, but it is disgusting because it turns people off, because it makes people feel deeply like they can't trust that person. Or let's say the women that are okay with that, that shows that they have an issue because they're okay with that. They're okay with having that kind of grotesque, problematic, whatever. That reflects that they themselves, despite being attractive, that they themselves also have kind of a, on some level abstract, kind of a disgusting deficiency in their own constitution, their own neurological constitution. So what I mean, I don't enjoy saying things that are disgusting. Like I don't say it with delight. I'm not trying to put people down. I'm trying to encourage people to take the gut punch, and sober up, and just get real. Not to live in pain, not to suffer, but to take the gut punch and move on from the level where they belong, and really be honest, really honest, because from that honest place, I think we'll start uncomplicating what already is a problem. Okay, that some people really do have deficiencies in their ability to have multiple considerations and maintain perspective, and that for our standard of evolution, people at the mainstream level are going to find that to be disgusting, right? And we just have to be honest about it, respect it. That's just the right, whatever. Now we can go the other way and we can be resentful about it, right? I'm resentful that people find me disgusting, so I now, am going to be hostile to the world. But that's deep down inside, we realize that's not an honest place. There's a turn we make. There's a left turn we make where we sort of can't stand and can't accept the fact that we actually do have things that are disgusting in us, and that other people are disgusted by it. And we just can't bear to sympathize with somebody who has hostility to me. Okay. But I say, take the gut punch and do the exercise of accepting, that somebody could have hostility or disgust at how ugly I am or how disgusting I am. Okay. And believe me, I deserve it. I can't go into full detail in a YouTube channel of how bad I am, but people do have the right to be disgusted by me. Okay. And it is hard to sympathize with somebody who hates you, but take the gut punch, and learn to sort of take the pain, get over the pain of accepting that there are things and they should make other people disgusted. But then instead of trying to make it all nice, okay, maybe that's not possible, because maybe I'm at a level where I don't even belong associating with the people that find me disgusting. Okay, but I can respect them. And then I could find my level, and my level is not the bottom of hell. My level is some intermediate level, find that place. And then dedicate myself to being as productive and as good of a person as I can be at my level, without pretending that I'm at some other level, and just take it on that, yes, like a lot of people, I have disgusting things, in my character, physically, whatever, but that unlikability is an issue. Okay. And we have to be sympathetic and understanding of unlikability and take it on with pain, but take it on so we don't get into that complication of getting into all this compensation or resentment about it. Okay. Where we just start complicating the problem. Okay. Because believe me, if I get a cut in my arm, okay, that's bad enough. But what I don't want to do is have my cut to be infected, complicated. The same thing with being unlikable. It's bad enough to be unlikable, but why complicate it? Why complicate it by falsifying ourselves to be more likable than we really are, or by getting into the resentment and being more loathsome than we really have to be? You see what I mean? So it's like but the only way to get there is by taking the gut punch, taking the pain, but don't let it end with the pain. And that's the other thing. We need to learn the maneuver, the practice of having pain and still operating. Okay. Because I believe that a lot of depression, a lot of despair is because we get stuck in the pain and we start to get into a feedback loop of the pain itself. And we don't practice the actual art of operating with pain. And then the pain sort of goes away, because I think that's the thing about resentment. Resentment is resentiment. It's where you sort of feel the feeling. Sometimes you just need to let the feeling be and don't think you can scratch the itch and make it better. Just let the itch, and then you forget about the itch, or the itch is just minor, but you're not going to complicate it by scratching. So I think that, I encourage people to try to take the gut punch of maybe not being attractive, maybe having deficiencies in their neurological capacity, or gross immaturities that really are kind of disgusting to other people. Just take it on. Don't have a big reaction, but just make sure that you don't try to associate with the kind of people that would find it to be really disgusting, because we need to take it as a sign that we need to find our niche in the world, which is not the highest or the lowest place, just our intermediate niche where we belong. Okay. And then try to make the best life possible in that niche, you know, um, with never pretending or concealing, just sort of taking the ugliness of it, but trying to work with it, So in my case, I have been that person, where, I like gambling so much that when I was in a very stressful situation, the only thing that was important to me was gambling, to the point that I became an idiot and ended up wasting, spending $70,000 that I didn't have, and destroying my life. Basically, I lost a job in that period, and I just became an asshole, you know. Or let's say, I'm sorry, I wasn't mature enough to have a girlfriend at a time when I was in a lot of crisis, and I tried to have a girlfriend, but at that time I was also like watching pornography, and I was into gambling, and I was just an asshole, and something happened in the relationship, and then I started getting into online dating and just stupid shit, and they found out about it. I was just in a bad place. I didn't have any business being in that relationship, because given the crisis I was in, given the limitations of my personality, I was only going to act like a disgusting person, because it is disgusting how people are when they can't handle all the shit in their life. So what I should have done is just stayed single and just dealt with all the pain and whatever the ugly things going on, and just dealt with them at that level, and I just couldn't handle being alone. Well, the avenue for anybody in life is to take the pain and make the best of it where you're at, and if you're in an ugly place in life, don't associate with people that could be injured by that, or who could find it disgusting, because they're not going to respect you, even if you put on all the false, falsify yourself to be better than you are. In the end, they're not going to really they're not going to really react. They may react superficially to the false front you put up, but deep down inside, they're only going to like you as much as the worst parts of you, the parts that you're concealing. So you can't really hide anything, because deep down inside, people are going to only like you as much as your ugliest parts. So that's the nasty truth that we can't escape, So whatever the ugliest parts for me, the ugly parts of my, let's say, my psychological makeup, the most vicious, the most, I would say just the most, the most vicious, the most, degenerate, like the most degenerate, weird parts of my psychology, that's the part that's going to matter for everybody, And so instead of just trying to avoid it and dance around it and camouflage it, no, that's the part where I have to find my place in life, and I have to work very hard to make the best life. And despite having that ugly, degenerate part of myself, and then just make the best of it, and it's not going to be a great life, but we just need to set our expectations so that we make the best. And then in a paradoxical way, we'll actually have a much better life that way than if we try to fake it, or try to, sort of dance around it, or sort of avoid the worst of us, And I mean, it's there's nothing magic about it, but the bottom line is that life is possible if we just go to the place of truth, and we take the gut punch, and then just work at that level to try to have the best life that we possibly can. So in my case, I know that there's some very degenerate, very ugly parts of me, that have to do, I think, with the limitations of my cluster B psychology, right? And so I have to make it a daily practice to sort of work on being a better person at those levels where I know I have the weakness, And in my case, it involves maybe tolerating more frustration, and maybe learning to take on more considerations and being burdened by those considerations as a way of life, knowing that I have a deficiency in that area, okay, that I'm never going to become strong in that area. I'm coming, deficient, but I work on those other areas. But it all comes from a place of accepting the worst, and that it is ugly. You know what I mean? So, being unlikable, it's a crisis, but if we address it openly, okay, without any distortion, that's the gateway to actually, find our place in life and do the best we can. So anyway, appreciate you guys watching, and thanks.